It's the moment Nigerians have been waiting for. Welcome to the program.
Yes, indeed. And you're still with the Rise News in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, as we bring you continuous coverage of Nigeria's state governorship and Houses of Assembly elections. I am Ngozi Alebu.
I'm Sulaiman Alede.
All right, Nigerians across 28 states of the country have been voting to elect governors to steer the affairs of their states for the next 4 years. And 17 new governors are expected to emerge, while incumbents are on the ballot in 11 states.
While there have been accusations of INEC officials turning up late to some polling units, other polling units in some states started on time. In Lagos State, there were flashes of unrest, violence, as well as voter intimidation. Our Rise News crew in Lagos was also attacked, our drone confiscated, and our reporter and cameraman brutalized and whisked off to a police station.
Yes, indeed. And in Edo State, youths around Sakomba axis of Oredo local government have apprehended 4 people who were caught with thumbprint ballot papers. Well, the incident occurred as polling units on that axis had commenced sorting and counting of votes. As the suspects were apprehended by residents, they were attacked. Well, security operatives promptly stepped in and whisked the suspects away and took them to the police command.
For more on the election violence witnessed across the country, we're now joined online by security consultant Dr. Kabir Adamu. Kabir, good to see you and thanks for your time. Quickly, Nigerians were waiting for this moment, but did you envisage what is being highlighted across the country?
Okay.
Good evening, Ngozi, as well. Yes, to an extent, and for the simple reason that, as you know, I run a consultancy and we keep records of security events across the 774 local governments of Nigeria. And so ahead of the elections, we were aware that in virtually all the 36 states and the 774 local governments, there were quote unquote security challenges. And that because the elections are going to happen in this eco space where there were security challenges, it would take a miracle for those security challenges not to affect the elections. So what we did is to classify 3 elements that wherever those 3 elements interplay, then our assessment indicated that there was going to be a security event on the day of the election. And what are these 3 elements? I'll quickly mention them. Number 1 is the existence of non-state armed groups. And this is like a generic term to refer to all actors that in one way or the other can influence violence. So they could include criminal groups, they can include terrorist groups, the bandits in the northwest, the north central part of the country, youth gangs, name them, they fall under all of that category. The second element is the desire or the willingness of political actors to incorporate this first group into the political process. And then the last point is the security of operators. What steps have they taken to prevent the first and second groups from either interfacing or acting? So anywhere these 2 or 3 elements interface, we were sure there was going to be some form of electoral violence. And so sadly, throughout today, from our intelligence collection platforms and that of other partners that were one way or the other associated with several civil society organizations, and then of course some security departments as well, government security departments, we recorded, frankly, almost everywhere in the country, one or the other form of security events. In the course of the conversation, we can probably break down into teams and discuss these themes. As an example, we saw voter suppression specific to certain locations. We saw observers being attacked, pressmen being attacked. We saw in certain instances violation of the code of conduct of the Electoral Act by security personnel and things like that. So we could group that into some teams and discuss them in the course of our conversation.
And we'll still like you to actually break it down into those themes that you talk about. But how do you explain the level of violence in different parts of the country where they were actually expected, and just like you have, pointed out in Lagos, Edo, what have you, in spite of the massive deployment of security, over 300,000 police officers, boots on ground, in addition to other security agencies. What exactly went wrong? Where was the ball dropped? And what could we have done better?
I wish I knew you were going to ask me this question. Yesterday, my team in Beacon Consulting, we sat down and we came up with a visualization we call indicators of electoral deficit in Nigeria. So we listed 12 things that we categorize as indicators of electoral deficit. And out of all those 12 things, only 2, or if you extend it 3, applied to INEC. And what am I trying to say here? Because consistently we've mentioned that election is a multi-stakeholder activity, where what we saw today is an exemplification of the fact that our cultural values and the environmental circumstances in which INEC is conducting the elections is a very difficult one. And that difficulty, sadly, and I hate to say this, is not a difficulty that one organization can manage. It must be a collective responsibility by all of us, including, and I must say this, the media, in ensuring that some of the messaging that is going out helps galvanize us toward a discussion that would take care of those indicators. And let me give you an example. February 25th, the elections that happened, the presidential and national assembly elections, a lot of what happened today happened on that day. Now, how many persons were arrested and prosecuted? So that the deterrence element within our public justice system would play out. I am not aware. The best I had was the Inspector General of Police calling on his personnel to make sure they gather and present the case files of everyone arrested for prosecution by INEC. And that is not what serves as deterrence in a criminal justice system. We need to show in a very credible manner that those who commit offenses are arrested and that they are punished. In this instance, we didn't see that. So what is going to stop them from engaging in the same activities and actions that they benefited from on February 25th? That's number one. Number two is the issue of holding to account. Now, the body that takes care of election management is an ad hoc committee in INEC called the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security. That body, sadly, is not accountable. And I hate to say this, and I say it with all sense of responsibility. We need to have a system of monitoring and evaluation within that body that allows you as a journalist to engage with the chairpersons of that committee, and the two chairpersons are the INEC chairman himself and the National Security Advisor. So what kind of, a lot of money has been spent in managing security, but how do we ask questions around how that money is being spent? Who is responsible for what components of the election security managed? And that brings me to the third point. What is the election security management plan? I'm not aware that that has been developed. And if it has been developed, why wasn't it made available? Now, because that accountability element is almost missing, that this kind of cycle of repetition of, what we saw, the ugly, virtually every Nigerian is embarrassed today because of what we saw, especially, and I want to say this with all sense of responsibility, what happened in Lagos, it's embarrassing.
Okay, let me jump in here because yourself and some others at Beacon Consulting did come up with something just after the presidential election, trying to hazard a guess, or well, that was an analysis by your team, letting us in on some of the key features of that report, if you will, because it centers around the elections in Nigeria.
Thank you. So we produced different type of reports. We focused on the elections. We highlighted some components of these indicators of electoral deficit in Nigeria. But more importantly, because we're an intelligence and enterprise security risk management company, we focused on the component of what we call enterprise security risk management regarding the elections. Now, some of the elements I've mentioned earlier on, but more importantly, and this is also very good and I would say encouraging, we saw a reduction in security incidents ahead of the elections. In the case of abduction, almost an 80% reduction if you add the figures for January and for February, compared to the figures for December and then, of course, the whole of 2022. So clearly, something very good was done by those that were managing our security, public security managers. 80% anyway is a good, it's a plus, it's an A. Second point is the fatalities. We saw an increase in events. By events, we mean incidents. So we keep tally of these events, but remember, those events lead to something. And that is where fatalities come in. If there's an attack in a particular location, what would follow it would be some form of fatality. So interestingly, there was an increase in those events. But the positive development there was a massive reduction in the fatalities. So between December and January, we saw almost a 60% reduction. But interestingly, again, if you go from January to February, we saw a 17% reduction. So if you add the two, we're talking of almost a 70% reduction in fatalities. So all of this, unfortunately, was silent. But two things came to light in doing our analysis. What led to this reduction? Number one is increased security operations across the country just before the elections. So everywhere you go to in the country at the moment, you see the footprint of different security agencies conducting one or the other form of operations. And what did that lead to? It reduced the versatility of the threat elements within the Nigerian ecospace. So if you pick the bandits as an example, it became a little bit more difficult for them to move around rural communities and carry out the type of actions that they did with impunity. And even where they were able to do that, it was difficult for them to succeed. So again, a very positive development, and that's for security. But when we tied it to the political development, that the election itself proper, what were the factors that we identified that led to some of the security challenges during the election? One of them was the manipulation of the processes. And I'm very happy that groups like Yaga did an extensive work on that. So ours was just to do an analysis and then try to match it rather with the security outcome in the country. So almost everywhere where the potential or the index indicated that manipulation could be high, we saw some form of electoral violence in that location. So good examples would be places like Kano, places like Lagos that we discussed, and Rivers State. And then the role of security agencies during the election management process. We also highlighted that there was massive improvement. Or some of the concerns that we had ahead of the elections, nothing played out, mainly because the election security management process was able to manage that. So these are some of the elements that we put out in that report. But there were more detailed elements, for instance, regarding recommendations on what could improve the processes, both at the national level and then, of course, at the state level.
Fantastic. And it'll be nice to know where we can actually learn from so that going forward, we don't repeat the mistakes. Tell us what the ideal election security plan would be, because you touched on that moments ago. You asked the question in, planning for these elections, was there any election security plan, whether by INEC or even the security agencies? What would be the ideal situation?
So I'm really delighted to say that INEC has one of the most advanced election risk management infrastructure that you can brag of, globally. It's the most modern method for identifying and evaluating risk, and that's the beginning point. So I would say with all sense of responsibility that INEC is able to identify and to evaluate the risk. It has a functional risk management department, and that department is kind of twofold. There is a unit within INEC itself, and then there is the Electoral Institute, rather, TEI, which is a subunit of INEC. What it does is it has incorporated technology, and that technology is able to collate data on events across Nigeria, and then evaluate that data, and then put it forward in form of a report. Now that takes us to the next point, because if it's not just enough to identify and evaluate threat elements, what is even more important is to put forward mitigation measures. But therein lies the challenge. INEC is not in control of public security departments. INEC has to share that information with this public security department. So what INEC did as far back as 2012 is to set up an ad hoc committee called the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security. And the result of this collection of threat activities, it puts it into a report, has a meeting with the public security department, and then shares that information. So at that point, it becomes the responsibility of the public security departments to now manage the threats that have been identified by INEC. And remember earlier on, I said part of the challenge is that there is no accountability within that space. And the reasons for this are manifold. One of them is the legacy from our military rule. The reality is that a lot of these security departments will not willingly subject themselves to a civilian body. So again, that is a lacuna within our laws, both the Electoral Act and the Constitution. How do we create an environment, a circumstance where the security departments will subject themselves to some level of control by INEC when it comes to election security management? A lot of recommendations have been made. A good example is who is heading the security department within INEC. Does that person have enough clout, for instance, to look at this leadership of the security departments and ask them critical questions regarding deployment? The second element, sadly, and I must say with all sense of responsibility, is the issues of corruption. When, for instance, we're told that 300 police personnel are going to be deployed for security duties, who can account for that? Out of the plus 400 police officials that we have, if you remove 300, the 100, what would it be? And remember, within that 400, there are persons who are admin officers, definitely involved in. So a lot of these issues are taken care of when it comes to the recommendation. But suffice to say that there are gaps within the laws that allows INEC to manage security. But as far as I'm concerned, the technology, the framework for managing the security in INEC is modern, and it's something that we should be proud of.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Kabiru Adamu is a security consultant with Beacon Consulting. All right, let's cross very quickly to Rivers State. One of the states, of course, has been pointed out as a flashpoint. Our own Andy Omano joins us live from there. Andy, good to see you. What can you report for us today? I mean, a lot of drama has unfolded in Rivers State, hasn't it?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ugozi. Great to be here. Great to be here. Rivers State, like you rightly pointed out, is one of the flashpoint states in this 2023 general elections. Since morning, it's been a game of musical chairs, if I'm allowed to use that expression. I covered the election in all the Ogoni Council areas, and in Kana specifically, there was an altercation between INEC officials who brought the voting materials for Ikwiri local government area to Kana, and those who were supposed to exercise their franchise, they find it funny, and that exhibited into a face-off that led to crisis, and in the process, 2 were killed in Kana today as we speak. And away from Kana, we moved on to Emoha, where 2 also were killed at a Librada, and another 3 and another 3 in Ogbakiri, in the same Librada. So it's been from one crisis to the other. There was a very high level of apathy because so many people who participated in the presidential and national assembly election, they indicate interest in today's because their position was that if our vote did count in the first instance, how is there any likelihood that it's going to count? And from the assurances that the electoral umpire gave, I felt that what we saw today did not live up to the billing. As we speak, the electoral umpire or the security agencies, especially the police, who are the lead security agencies in today's election, are not come out to bring us up to speed as to what happened and what is likely going to happen tomorrow, because 2 local government areas of Degema and Asari Toro elections were not held there. Kana, if you ask me, Ngozi, I was there personally. There was no election as it were. It was all a case of ballot boxes snatching, intimidation, and what have you. And the people are asking, what have we learned between 1999 and today of the democratic experience that we are into?
Let me jump in here. Away from the questions that people will be asking, you've painted a very gory and worrying picture for us and Nigerians, talking about the death recorded in so many places in Rivers State. Omano, we understand that voting didn't take place in some places, as you highlighted, but again, has INEC spoken about why and when that will happen in the days to come?
Sulai, the electoral umpire, as I do this interview, are still maintaining a seed lips. And like I mentioned in passing, we had expected that they will bring the Rivers people up to speed as to what will happen in Degema and Asari local government area where these elections did not hold because of one challenge or the other, especially intimidation and late arrival of electoral materials. Over to you, Sula.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your time. You stay safe out there, and we do hope we'll come back to you for developing
more updates.
Stories. Thank you, Omano.
All right, moving on now. Observers say Saturday's governorship and House of Assembly election was marred by voter intimidation. Vote buying, yes, vote buying is still very much alive. Violence, low turnout, and destruction of election materials. Tunji Olanikwekun compiled the report.
A presidential election that was widely disputed as grossly below standard by both international and local observers, Nigerians expected a better showing from the Independent National Electoral Commission on Saturday. However, if reports from observers who monitored the exercise across the country are anything to go by, not much has changed. In Abuja, election observers who have set up situation rooms give initial assessment of the governorship and state houses of assembly election as reported by their officers on the field across the country. For Clean Foundation, which focuses on the role of security personnel and their conduct during the election, the performance of the police is largely commendable. Clean Foundation says 75% of the polling units covered by its officers had adequate security.
Election commenced early in most of the polling units visited across the country. Security agents and INEC at-work staff were seen before 8 a.m. in majority of the polling unit visited. Clean Foundation observers report that 75% of the polling unit there were adequate security personnel. At most of the polling unit, 2 or more security personnel were cited.
It is gratifying to see, to be getting reports of improved professional conduct.
However, the Albino Foundation Africa and Connected Development contradict the Clean Foundation report. In separate reports, both organizations say the election was marred by extreme violence. According to them, the Nigeria police did not live up to expectation despite repeated assurances.
As of 11:40 a.m., TAF Africa's Persons with Disabilities Election Hub received a critical report of extreme violence from field observers. In Rivers State, a Mehua local government area, Obakri Ward, Rumuada Town, Hall polling unit, gunshots from thugs dispersed voters.
In Ebonyi State, one of our own, an accredited Usabe field observer, Uzodimma Lucy Ogodo, was brutally attacked for refusing to vote for a particular political party. This is unacceptable and against the tenet of democracy, which we strive hard to maintain as a nation. In Lagos State, Ojo Iba LCDA local government area, polling unit, Princess Enesi Street, Victory Estate, polling unit code 091 was attacked by party hoodlums. In fact, the pregnant wife of our Lagos State lead was attacked and is currently recuperating. We will not relent until we get justice for our people.
For the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room, the high level of destruction of election materials, voter suppression, as well as low turnout of voters in some states should be of concern to all lovers of democracy. ActionAid Nigeria laments low turnout of women in Saturday's election, although the organization commends the early arrival of election materials and INEC officials to polling units.
When you talk about the opening material deployment, I mentioned when I was starting that's largely, is impressive compared to the presidential election. So that's compliance. And factor here is that we look at deployment starting on Wednesday to the states, which was not the case during the presidential election.
Beavers are functioning in 80-something% of places we observe, and there is a great improvement from what was experienced during the presidential election.
The Situation Room is particularly concerned by the reports in some of the communities in Lagos State, where there are traditional festivals coinciding with the election day, which is which discourages voter turnout and increases tension. Kimpact Development Initiative reels out data and figures to depict the level of violence in Saturday's election. The organization says 67 cases of violence have been confirmed as at 3 p.m. Saturday. The organization claims 31.3% of the violent cases occurred in Lagos, while 64.2% were recorded in southern Nigeria.
Out of the 67 electoral violent cases we recorded, for the first time, we have 50% of these happening between 9 o'clock in the morning and 12 noon. In the past, what we normally have is that you have this spike around 2 o'clock when counting and sorting are ongoing. But we notice that this also changed, and some of them happen in the morning, most especially the intimidation and harassment.
For Yaiga Africa, INEC needs to take remedial actions in polling units where irregularities were reported, as well as ensure strict adherence to the election guidelines on collation of results.
Yaiga Africa watching the vote data center received 54 verified critical incident reports, primarily concerning intimidation and harassment of voters, disruption of voting, and destruction of election materials.
And this is why we've called on security agencies to respond promptly, because stripping people of the responsibility as well as the opportunity, to vote at this election is antithetical to democratic principles.
As Nigerians wait for the final results, many fear that the final outcome may not reflect the will of the people.
Well, for more on the reports from the civil society organizations, we're being joined now in the studio by the director of the Center for Democracy and Development, or CDD, Hidayat Hassan. Good to see you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, it looks as if now telling some people like our reporter in Rivers State, congratulations for staying alive is really important here. But again, paint for us a picture of how it went. First off, we realized that this election ended way before 4 p.m. as against what we saw during the presidential election, people voting into midnight.
3 hours of the morning.
Yeah, I think importantly what we should say for these elections is as it relates to INEC performance, the opening of polls was very good. In fact, across, we have like 80% of early commencement in our observed polling unit, and this cuts across all the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. Yes, in some certain instances, they were like late opening, but they are just like few. The functioning of the BVAS also was at above par compared to what we saw in the elections, and I think in polling units with fewer persons, we saw the immediate upload of the results again, which was like we saw an improvement with the elections from the side of INEC. But that's just only one part of the election. So while the electoral management body has actually been able to improve on our own deployment of the elections, if we go by the way of institutions, the security agencies have not actually done very well in these elections. We have instances of intimidation of observers. We've seen with journalists. We've also seen a system where the security agencies look sideways while infractions have been committed in several parts of the country. And above all, again, we've witnessed inadequate deployment of security agencies where you are not even now accusing them of complicity. The mere fact that their deployment was really inadequate meant that law and order could not actually be maintained in several parts of the country. The flip side of this is that violence is now defined the elections, and this violence is not actually confined to one part of the country. So while we've been talking about the challenges of voter suppression, voter suppression is not just in Lagos. We experienced the same in Delta. We saw the same in Edo State. We saw the same in, I think we have just even bird-eye view of the list of states, Bayelsa. Across the country, the slogan of "if you are not voting for us, stay home" was all over in the different, even Zamfara, geopolitical zone of the country, which has actually now kind of, and that is just one strategy in terms of voter suppression. We saw more and more strategy. So these elections is now being defined by violence such that you start wondering what the integrity of the vote,
which is really unfortunate, because you wonder if over the years, I mean, I took a list of timeline of electoral violence since 1964 till date, and it looks like well, if you consider what happened in 2007, 2011, about 300 people died, unfortunately, due to election violence. How much progress really have we made? And with the observation that you've made now, does it cast a big question mark on not just the process of the governorship elections, but whatever the outcome might be?
I think it casts a very big doubt on the outcome itself, and our report on Monday will actually be shedding light on that. That is not just about votes, violence, and I think integrity is like what we want to even name it. It casts a lot on it, because what is the essence? And when you look at it historically, you will again find out that violence has always been a feature of subnational elections. The question now is how to frame the violence in this election. So we know that it has always been a feature that once you have the presidential elections, it's violent, but it's never as violent as the subnational elections, where you say that politics is local and the actors are multifaceted in these instances. And the actors that will foment the violence feel closely connected to the local politician or parties that they are actually supporting. But also the outcome of the 25th elections is contributed to it, where people now know that, for instance, one of the best way with the BVAS is actually to go and capture the BVAS, disrupt opposition stronghold, utilize as much, use voter suppression to circumvent the process as the new way of rigging, especially now that you know that it's much more difficult to rig with this so-called new technology. So the lesser people you get to vote, the lower the turnout, and ensuring that your own supporters turn up to actually vote. You use both the online and the offline to actually prevent people from participating in the elections, the better your chances of winning.
You know, listening to you talk about other strategies, I think it's key that we start, highlighting some of these and now put it on the doorstep of security agencies. In this case, the police. So we've seen on, viral videos, and these have not been denied by these personalities, known individuals who have threatened people before election day. And we've also seen people also go online, threaten people to come with their pets or their guard dogs, which has actually prevented some people from going to cast a ballot.
Strategy.
Yes, so it comes to what you highlighted earlier on by saying that there are different strategies employed to suppress voters. Let's speak more on this and see if the police or the agencies did act to ensure that, some of these troublemakers were actually put at bay.
I think we didn't get really, there were a few instances of people being arrested. I think like 3 political thugs arrested, but it's not like it was widespread. I'll tell you that before I got here, the data we've been looking at, the numbers we've been crunching, seems that most of these infractions actually went unpunished itself. So look at Rivers, look at Sokoto North in a polling unit where cubicles were destroyed, materials were destroyed, and people were actually deprived from voting. Voting. And what is actually, and for the online itself, the first 6 hours, we came across a flurry of intimidation videos that, like the dogs you were talking about, this purported Uru, of course, which happened traditional festival, but some of the videos were also fabricated so that in the minds of people, they become very, very scared and they are not able to actually approach the polling unit to vote. But in all of these instances, it is the failure of institutions to act, the failure of the security agencies to act that has become like an albatross on the neck of these elections. It's not even the vote buying, which we saw feature prominently in these elections compared to the February 25th elections. And of course, I think that what we say is that vote became cheaper in these elections compared to those 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 votes sold for as low as 1,000 naira, aside from other food or materials that were actually shared.
Let's talk about voter apathy. Apparently, that is one singular thing that's hung over the whole process today. What do you think is responsible for that, apart from the picture that you've painted and all the different strategies to scare people away? Do the electorate themselves, do the Nigerians themselves understand that when you don't go to the ballot, when you don't go to the polls, you're actually making it easier for the people who you don't want to emerge to actually emerge? And who's responsible? Who really should be educating the people as far as that's concerned?
I think that the people are educating themselves, civil society are educating them. Well, voters' apathy is actually influenced by different things in these elections. You know, the normal thing we often talk about is violence, the fact that security or performance, poor performance, like in the last in the first instance, or they feel that their vote will not count, or the failure of democracy to deliver development. But in this context, it's actually varied, really. Like we had already projected that in these elections, it will be a mixed bag. In some parts of the country, you expect to see increased turnout. In other parts, you will see low turnout, and that also happened. In states where they have significant, where incumbents are on the ballot, and they are in a tight race, you saw like increased voter turnout. In other places like Kano, Katsina, at least visibly, we are still looking at our figures. You see like 180, you see like 130 people already turn out to vote, whereas in others, even in 10 unit, in a 10-person polling unit, only one came out to vote according to the data. But these challenges are drawn by different reasons. So like in our own preliminary statement, we for instance, cited that in the South-South, the general sense of discouragement was also due to that event of the February 25th itself, that there is actually no point in coming out to vote beyond the violence that we have seen in this election. So that contributed against the backdrop of what also happened.
You know, listening to you sometimes, it looks as if we're going back, but is the crux of the matter security? Because you've painted the picture of the events of February 25, which definitely will affect some people, but by and large, the threats, the audacious threat, and in this case, saying that the agencies that should actually challenge these threats haven't acted. Now, how does it come across to you and your team, looking at what the police, the IG and his team has said, that they were prepared for this election? And so far, listen to Omano, death in pockets of units around River State and some other places in Lagos State where people have been attacked.
It's not, please stop highlighting two states as case studies. In fact, it is widespread. And it's only by tomorrow we'll be coming with concrete to tell you like the numbers, how many, but the violence we are seeing is actually across board. So we've seen Ebonyi, we've seen a number, we've seen in like unlikely places you would think of. We've seen Bauchi, we've seen the tense nature in Kano. We've seen like and every part of the country. So the deployment is actually a very big issue. Then the fact that I don't actually know. There also seems to be some form of complicity, which we cannot take away.
Let me bring this quickly. Sorry to cut you there. I really hate to do this. Do you think it's a fight against beavers, a fight against a system, an electronic device that ultimately will record people's vote on D-Day, and that is why we're seeing this widespread violence?
That is why I'm saying that is why the strategy changed. So it's the fight against beavers. You have actually put it like the fight against beavers and IREV, which means that with beavers, if you upload the result, you transmit it, then it becomes very difficult for you to actually change the results. So it means the strategy of rigging will have to change. And the strategy is to use violence to disrupt an opposition stronghold, is to ensure that people do not turn out to vote except in your own stronghold. It is to incentivize people as much as possible, buying money, going. We saw places in Bauchi, open display of the new Naira by a serving commissioner. We saw a lot of incentives, so people are incentivizing or disincentivizing people from voting. And we saw party agents, and I think one important trend from these elections is also the role party agents have also played, as well as the intra-party squabbles during the primaries, which led many of the actors to leave the main party and go to vie in other parties. So what happens was that led to a diffusion of violence. So previously, if 4 of them were in one party before, 4 now they are limited. Now 4 have gone to 4 different parties with possibly equal chances of winning a couple of seats. So then the division of violence coming, then you see party agents across board. I think I've never noticed as much trend as that, engaging in fist cuff, fighting openly. They are one of the source of disruption to these elections.
What do we make of this democracy really then? Are we really making much progress as far as this is concerned? But let's even leave that. Let's come to INEC itself. In the course of the day, we've heard people actually say, look, there's a need to unbundle INEC, the electoral umpire, because over decentralization of, the INEC, maybe part of the challenge. Maybe that's one of the issues here that needs to be looked at. Do you agree with that there's a need for INEC to be unbundled in a way that the state electoral umpires can actually, handle the elections, whether the presidential elections or even the state elections?
I think one of the problems, aside from unbundling INEC, one of the problems with Nigeria is that problem of federalism we've always talked about. And this federalism, while it's a positive, as also represented, does also represent challenges to us as a country. So here, these recs are supposed to possibly be under the control of INEC, but if truly they are under the control, we do not know, because today the old sway, Abuja is coordinating and ensuring that everything actually works fine. But unbundling INEC is important, particularly if you look at this level of violence. and the use of role money plays in politics. So who monitors the campaign financing, who ensures that all these people who are violating the laws are immediately brought to book, like the Electoral Offences Commission bill that is presently pending, and INEC will not be burdened with prosecuting it. But important will be the appointment of who actually comes into INEC. I think for long, we have not been able to get that right. And in this era of diabolic politics, which is this beavers revolution you are finding this happening, it means you will have to do a lot. You will not just be thinking of improving a system. As you are improving the system, the bad actors are also looking for how to break the system. So the appointment process becomes extremely important. Then also, this appointment process is not just who appoints them, the caliber of people they appoint, the competence of the people itself. Have you managed 20 people before they ask you to come and manage like 1 million staffers or even 100,000 or 30,000 at the state level, and to manage an election in a complex country like Nigeria? But also the timing is very relevant. When you look at some of these resident electoral commissioners, most of them came in like 4 months into the elections. How well are they seated? Whereas the senior people who planned the elections themselves left like 1 year into the elections, because the elections is like a process. Election is a process. It doesn't just happen in 3 months. It has been, at least we believe, they've started planning since 2019. Then you lose like half or 3/4 of your team. What happens? So it's really about strengthening the institution, doing the unbundling, going back to the waste panel report, committee reports. In spite of this new Electoral Act 2022, we will need to do more.
You know, in doing more quickly here, I'm just trying to go back to the picture Ngozi painted, going through history of how we've always voted. And you also recall in the Second Republic, there were widespread violence to the extent that a lot of people knew where that led us to. Now we're here with a device we all thought was the be-it-all for us. And what the politicians have now devised, and the troublemakers, is to ensure that don't let them get to beavers. Because once you get to beavers, it's all over. So I still want us to talk about the police, really, because the police has always called itself. The police will say, this is what we have. We have this X amount of boots on ground. Speaking to Kabir Adamu earlier on, you can hazard a guess that there are intelligence reports that these agencies, individual agencies,
at their disposal.
Yes, give to the government and government agencies like INEC. Do you think the police is really not complicit in this? Because if you say your organization has recorded widespread violence, and till this moment we haven't seen number of arrests, it tells a worse story.
I think there are lots of reasons for it, and I'll continue to mention that while the police most times, and this I speak from myself as a director, like on several occasions when we go to the field, especially in off-cycle elections, they tell us they are going to deploy 30,000. Ability to see the 30,000 becomes extremely difficult. And in these elections, it's not just the police that is deploying. The NSDC, in fact, I think I've seen them, the Civil Defense Corps. I've seen them, like most of the reports, even being responsive in certain instances. But what is key and what we must say is inadequacy. Then in some certain instances, there is also complicity. So it's either people look away,
right,
or because their numbers are not enough, or they just choose look away. You remember in previous elections, we always complain that when vote buying is happening in the polling unit, the police or any of the security agencies rarely make any arrest until EFCC and ICPC got into it, or there is actually complicity. Because do not forget, politics is local, the dynamics are local, and people are interested parties in these elections.
Well, you can be sure that Nigerians are looking forward to a time when they don't need to over-police or over-militarize the electoral process. Thank you so much, Hidayat Hassan, for joining us on this special coverage of Nigeria's state governorship and Houses of Assembly elections. There's more when we return. Stay with us.
You're welcome back. Still watching special coverage of Nigeria's 2023 state assembly elections and governorship elections here on Arise. I'm Sulaiman Alede.
And I am Ngozi Alebo. Thanks for staying with us.
Well, the Arise news crew was attacked at Ikate, Elegushi during the coverage of the governorship election in Lagos State. Some unidentified persons challenged the crew for flying a drone to capture aerial shots of several polling units positioned near the palace of the Elegushi of Ikate Kingdom.
Well, footage of the drone never showed any interior part of the Elegushi Palace. The attackers forcefully pulled down the drone, damaged it, beat the crew and injured the cameraman, who suffered deep injuries and bled on his face. Policemen and soldiers around could not bring the situation under control, but the drone was later handed over to a senior police officer before the crew was taken to Ilason police station in Lekki. Well, Lagos State Commissioner for Home Affairs Anofiu Elegushi stepped in to stop the hoodlums from further attack and led the crew to the police station. Well, the Independent National Electoral Commission in Kaduna says the collation of election results will commence tomorrow by 10 a.m. Speaking exclusively to Arise correspondent Nisi Gabriel, the administrative secretary also confirmed that election results from the polling units were uploaded to the IREF portal.
Election process now as we speak.
Now, as we speak, we are awaiting the arrival of the collation officers and the returning officer. The returning officer for the governorship election is already in town, and as at now 9 o'clock p.m. today, the 18th of March 2023, the elections have been concluded in all the 23 local governments. We've had a little, hitches here and there, but basically, as the public is aware, elections here in Kaduna have been very, very peaceful, and I think we are very, very good. As things are, we are expecting the, coalition officers from the various local governments to begin the process of bringing the results so that we start the collation. But unfortunately, even the closest local governments, Kaduna North, Kaduna South, Igabi, Chukun, Kajuru, the local governments that are contiguous and very close to our headquarters, none of them is through and none of them has arrived. So we just sat at management level, and ICSES, the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, has been notified of the decision. We are not doing the collation tonight. We are suspending it until tomorrow 10 o'clock in the morning. By then, we would have gotten the local governments to arrive, and then we begin the process. However, let me tell you that just over there at the collation center, everything has been set. All the arrangements have been made. Pressmen have been invited. Stakeholders have also been notified that we are good to go with respect to the collation. So the collation cannot start today because there is nothing to collect. We can only collect what we have. So the collation is starting tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning, and tomorrow is 19th March 2023.
Before I let you go, can you confirm to Arise News that election results from the polling units were uploaded to IREF?
Yes, I can confirm that, definitely. All our results have been collated and uploaded to IREF. This was one of the major issues we faced on the 25th of February during the presidential and national assembly elections. And from what happened, we in the commission have learned our lesson. And we did one or two twiddlings, little nigglings, and everything is now ship-shape. So I can guarantee you that all the results here in Kaduna have been uploaded, and they are now in the servers of the Independent National Electoral Commission.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Well, as the state await what to collate, the state recorded low voter turnout and heavy security presence in today's governorship and State House of Assembly election. Governor Nasir El-Rufai and the APC governorship candidate Uba Sani both alleged that voter intimidation were recorded in the Zaria and Kajuru local government areas of the state. Arise correspondent Nisi Gabriel reports.
Polls opened early in Kaduna State, and not many people came out to vote. In some of the polling units visited by Arise News, the Beavers machine worked perfectly.
This time now, they came out early. Like around 8 o'clock, they were already here. But last time, they came out around 11 o'clock. And people were already here waiting for them before they came. So they had a lot of crowds here last time because people were waiting already. But this time, they came before people started coming out. So because they were here before people started coming out, people come and vote and go back home.
It's very peaceful. With what has happened today, you will know completely that what happened in presidential was a complete ruse. Today is so organized. So I just wish it continues this way.
Nigeria's Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, praised INEC for conducting a smooth poll.
I think INEC has done very well. It's a great improvement this time from the first election that has been done. Was commendable.
Leading candidates in the state commended INEC for a hitch-free process, but the APC governorship candidate Obasani and the governor of Kaduna State alleged voter intimidation in some local government areas in southern Kaduna.
But generally speaking, the process has been smooth across the state, except in a few places in southern Kaduna where we've got reports of voter intimidation, where people are being asked to vote for one party or go back home, and the security agencies are stepping in to deal with the situation.
We have recorded some cases of PDP for printing the ballot before it arrives to the polling units. So that is the only cases we had experienced, particularly in Kaduna.
So far so good. With what I have seen and the report I got in the last 1 hour, things are moving as expected. I want to, at this juncture, express a sincere appreciation to the umpires, that is INEC, for what they have done so far. I know that power comes from God. Whatever be the outcome, I'm very willing to accept it.
Although there has been apprehension about post-election violence in the state, the Commissioner of Police gives a clear warning to those who intend to cause trouble.
I advise them to stay clear of Kaduna. It's not safe for them, or else the long arms of the law will catch up with them.
As the electorate waits for the final collation and announcement of election results, it's hoped that peace and order will be maintained in the state. Nisi Gabriel, Arise News, Kaduna.
All right, for more on this, let's bring in Kaduna State our correspondent there, Nisi Gabriel, live, who's just joining us. Nisi, good to see you. Well, what more can you tell us? Listening to the governor there, it seemed to have gone well in terms of the process today, but he still complained about voter suppression and voter intimidation. What was that about? Coming from an incumbent governor, is it a self-indictment?
Well, good to talk to you, Ngozi. Well, it's funny when you say it's coming from an incoming governor. Well, just like you said, he's a governor of the state, and one wants to believe that he has access to intelligence reports. But like they allege, they said they have reports of voter intimidation in Kajuru local government area of Kaduna State and Zaria local government area of the state. But also, my sources from INEC say what happened in Zaria was just printer errors from the commission, whereby party logos were not visibly seen. So the party agents at those polling units did just allege that the beavers were already preloaded before the election. But those are issues for further investigation by both the INEC and both political parties. But so far so good. Kaduna State has been calm, peaceful, and visible presence of security operatives across the state.
Well, Gabriel, before I move on with my question, I'll go back to emphasize what Ngozi asked. She didn't say incumbent, she said incumbent governor. I know yes, there might be some glitches so that it doesn't look like...
We'll get it mixed up.
But again, let's talk about, the collation. Voting ended long before now, and it's almost midnight. Give us a sense of when people are expecting to get collation of results in Kaduna State. Gabriel.
Well, like you heard from the executive secretary of the commission here in Kaduna State, he says coalition are still ongoing at the local government level, and up until now, they have not arrived at the INEC headquarters. As I'm speaking to you now, I'm at the INEC. I'm standing in the premises of the INEC headquarters in Angwarimi in Kaduna State. Well, as you know, the election has to go through a series of process. After voting at the polling units, it will then be moved to the ward level and then the local government level. So, and Kaduna is a very big state. We have 23 local government areas here in Kaduna State. So I guess that's where the delay is coming from. But INEC officials did come out early, as at 8:30 a.m. in the morning, voters were already voting, exercising their franchise, their civil responsibility. And up until 2:30, the polls had closed. So, but one cannot say it's across board. The polls closed by 2:30. So one wants to believe that some other polling units polls might have closed by 3 p.m. Hence the delay.
Gabriel, let me come in here. Yes, we understand that we have a very big state as big as Kaduna, but even where you are is a local government. So the closer, the nearer local governments, what's with the local governments? How is it that these local governments that are in the city center, close to where INEC is, still haven't made that journey to INEC?
Well, it's shocking and surprising, and this decision was made by the executive board of INEC here in Kaduna State. Well, it might be that they don't want to start collation late at night, and it has been a hectic day here in Kaduna State. Everyone is tired. You agree with me? Everyone has been on the streets, monitoring election and moving around polling units. So it's my sense that they just want everyone to go home, relax, and get a fresh start tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. in the morning, for the collation of election results across the 23 local government areas in Kaduna State, right here at the INEC headquarters.
Before we let you go, the issue of voter turnout, voter apathy and all of that, and it will be nice to hear from you what preparations are in place in the event of likely post-election violence, which you pointed out in your report.
Yes, that's a crucial point, because I did ask the Commissioner of Police about post-election violence in Kaduna State, and he was confident that they are fully ready to curtail any of those incidents if they eventually come up. And in terms of voter apathy in Kaduna State, of course, there was a visible presence of voter apathy. People didn't come out enough to cast their ballots compared to what we saw during the presidential and National Assembly election in the state. But, well, it is what it is, and one would have expected that people will come out to exercise their civic responsibility, because the governorship election and that of the State House of Assembly are positions closer to the grassroots, and those positions will go a long way to define what happens in the state. But it seems many people are just dissatisfied with INEC performance during the presidential and the National Assembly election. And before I need to add this again, operatives of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, did arrest some persons in Kaduna State for vote buying along the Angwarimi area of the state. And some operatives of the commission were also attacked.
And Gabriel, I was away from the election proper. I was going to ask what's the weather like in Kaduna. I see it's 9th time in Kaduna. It looks to be a very hot weather, isn't it?
It's sweating.
Yeah, I'm sweating because I'm under the weather myself, but Kaduna is a bit cold.
That's a good place to leave it. Go take good care of yourself. Nisi Gabriel, our man in Kaduna there. All right, from Kaduna, let's take you to Rivers State, where the governorship candidates and the state governor, Nyesom Wike, voted during the governorship and House of Assembly elections earlier today. They expressed divergent views on the elections. Udwak Patrick filed this report.
Governorship candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Similalayi Fubara, Accord Parties Dumo Lulu Briggs, the All Progressives Congress Tony Cole, and the Action Alliance Dawari George, speak after they vote.
The machine is effective. So I believe if every other unit around the LGA and in the states, it goes this way, there will be a age-free election. My people they are really happy and they can't wait to deliver their brother. I think that should explain the excitement and the spirit you're feeling around here.
I think that there's a lot of apathy and fear and all that in several places from what we have seen. Even here we heard in Abonima up until last night, the Rumbo for PDP do not come out. You can see most of the old people, they didn't even bother to come out. In Farga, Ward 1, Unit 49, I hear that even the INEC workers are teasing that maybe they may have to go and knock on doors for people to come out. There's a lot of fear in Emoha local government area. I think Ward 11 in Unit 4, the complaint has already been made to the police. They've already stabbed a young man and I called an agent in the hand, because he was standing for a court. They chased at everybody. That report is there. In Ikwere, Ward 3, Unit 6, it's been reported that the results that they brought there, are photocopies.
It's a mix. Already in certain wards in Abonima, there's been cases of ballot snatching, and that's troubling. In other cases, there have been issues of vote buying and intimidation. You still have manual recording, collation, and upload of results, and that aspect of it is still vulnerable. And that's why we're urging INEC that the technology to accredit, vote, and upload at the same time electronic voting is something that must be done.
Our democracy is under siege. What we have seen is not an improvement on what we saw during the presidential election. If anything, this particular election is the worst in terms of the way and manner in which the electoral umpire INEC has conducted itself in its response to the cries of the people and the calls for the people for a more transparent and credible process. We have not seen that at all, and instead what we have seen is that clearly INEC is not ready to conduct credible elections in Rivers State.
On his part, Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike commends the Independent National Electoral Commission for an improvement on the process.
Obviously, they are discouraged, but for whatever it is, the number is still okay. You can't force people to go and vote.
It's been very peaceful. We are hoping that it will remain peaceful. The only area we are yet to get the actual position for now is in the oceanic area, that's across the sea. But so far, so good. The beavers here in my ward is working well. We are hoping that and things are peaceful. It's calm because I guess our people have learned a lot of lessons, particularly from 2019, that violence does not pay anybody. Nobody benefits from violence.
Politics is a game of interest. Politics is interest-driven. Based on what we have done, based on the campaign we did, and based on what His Excellency Governor Ian Wike has put in place for us here, I think the people are convinced. We were able to talk to them. No campaign is the articulation of actions. We put everything for them to see. Although we have a bit of, I must say, a bit of difficulties here, which by the grace of God, we have engaged our people, and I know that the result will reflect that we've surmounted.
All right, to discuss more on the elections, we're now being joined by Professor Adele Jinodu, who is the Chair, Election Analysis Center for Democracy. That's a CDD. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's nice to be here.
Yes, and thank you for your patience through all of that. First off, your assessment of the outcome, or the process really, not the outcome. It's not yet the outcome of the process today, whether on the part of INEC, the security agencies, or the people themselves.
I think the reports we've received so far from the field indicate that INEC has done much better than it did last time. The reports indicate, for example, that most polling units started on time, that materials were delivered on time, that polling officials got to their various polling units on time. So I think that is quite an improvement on what happened last time.
Well, according to the CDD, about 80%.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which actually is just
more
about the same level about the same level with the presidential elections, because our figures show that it's around that 85%. But I think what gave the impression about things not going here was the failure to upload the IREV. And of course some late starting and so on. But the beavers also worked fairly well now, just as they did last time. Where there were problems, they were timelessly adjusted to make them
Now
work.
you're talking about timeliness, and some Nigerians are quite, impressed or surprised that this election didn't take us into the night or midnight. Some of them were done and over with before 4 p.m. and 2 p.m. Have you been able to gauge what actually caused this timeliness on the part of INEC to see that the elections ended on schedule?
Well, I think it is partly two things that I can think of. One is that INEC started on time. INEC started on time. That's the report we got, started most time. The beavers worked very effectively, and therefore it reduced the amount of time people had to be accredited and to go and vote. But I think also that in some places the turnout was very low to start off with, but I think it picked up later. So I think the voter turnout was also a factor in this. And of course the low turnout also may be due to fear of violence and so on and so forth. So those issues that somehow prevailed 3 weeks ago did not prevail this time around, and that may explain the reason why the polling units closed on time.
So it's safe to say that lessons were learned from the outcome of the February 25 presidential election. But let's talk about the fear that you just mentioned now. There seems to have been some kind of mutual fear on the part of INEC officials and the electorate. And I'm talking about what happened today at the VGC, the Victoria Garden city area of Lagos, where we've been told by the Lagos State Rec, Segun Agbaje, that elections will hold in 10 polling units tomorrow, Sunday. And the INEC officials were afraid to go into the VGC premises.
Yes.
And the VGC residents were afraid to go out of their gate to cast their ballot. What do you make of that, this fear?
Well, I think, historically, elections have been more or less the continuation of war by other means. We've always fought elections as if we were going to war.
Like it's a do or die affair.
Yeah, like a do or die affair. But what makes it more serious this time around is the combination of, is the role that identity politics seems to have played. And what I mean by identity politics is the deployment of ethnicity and religion into the fray. And the going by the results of the presidential elections in some states, people were afraid. So the whole question of the identity issue, particularly ethnic issue, became much more rife and a potent factor. And I blame the political parties for this. Because, and it is not simply a matter of you against us, but also turning against those who are of the same ethnic group with us, but whom we see as traitors. So they also are also afraid. Because, so you are supporting them, okay, you go out. So I think, we need to take a close look at it. But I think that is a very, very important factor, which plays not only in Lagos, I think throughout the country, because the whole process that led up to the elections in February and now, the whole thing over zoning being, rotational presidency between North and South, also aggravated that. The whole question of Muslim ticket also aggravated that. But to put it on top of that is what I think is the resort to hate speech. This resort of hate speech. Right. People being called invaders, people being called bastards, people being called, so those issues, so it seems that the political parties were not able to douse that tension that flowed around the role of ethnicity in politics.
Let me come in here, Professor Chinadu, and quite frankly, Nigerians will talk about, you spoke about identity politics, and now let's try and as much stretch it to location and say, who doesn't know VGC? And for those who know the Victoria Gardens, the city in Lagos, is it synonymous to a violent area? So when people like INEC and its REC tell the world that my people were afraid to go into VGC, and they wanted the people to come out of what ostensibly is a safe haven, it puts a question mark on what INEC is selling to the people.
No, it's not that. I mean, politics has been criminalized. So criminals are deployed to go and cause mayhem elsewhere. That's the point. It is not those who are living there, it is those who come out from outside of those areas, who have been deliberately, areas that have been deliberately targeted, and you now, quote unquote, take people in there, either a day or two before the elections, to cause mayhem. I think that is the point. Because around the whole question of the identity politics is the criminalization of politics itself.
I'd like you
see on social media somebody who doesn't even live in an area say, if you are going to vote for somebody else, not for our own, don't come out. If you come out, and that's circulated on the social media, and you cannot control movement.
Really, INEC needs to come clean on this because, this is a conversation we're having, and it's not a debate, but it's a hard sell for anyone to say VGC is unsafe. That where could be safer for anyone who lived in VGC was to come to the expressway. So the whole talk about violence, threats, come into question now. Has the police or security agencies done pretty well to ensure that these threats that we saw, we heard, and even some had to beg and recant, were better managed before the election?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what security measures you are put in place. But I was listening to that very important discussion that before we came on, where the security expert was taking at, look, INEC can do all the risk factors assessment, all the challenges, but mitigation does not lie with INEC, because INEC can only say, look, this is our own intelligence model we have. But INEC does not have the ability, the power, in fact, to prevent that happening if it does happen, or even to take preemptive measures against it.
Right.
So I think I think we should look beyond INEC, and because, see, I think there's been a narrative in this election
I thought you were going to say we should look towards INEC, especially INEC Lagos, not even beyond INEC.
You know why I'm saying that? There are certain things that are not within the control of INEC. There are certain things that are within the control of INEC. So we can blame them for things that are within their control. But doing risk assessment and looking at the challenges is different from now what do you do to mitigate it.
Right.
You see, there are certain things that are not within the competence of INEC to do, but and I think it's important to emphasize this point, because I think it was on this platform yesterday that Idayat made reference to what some people call that election in transitional societies take place in the context of what they call of diabolic politics. Diabolic politics, not in terms of routinized bureaucracy, where we are planning and you can execute and so on and so forth. But between planning and execution, there is something in the middle.
What exactly is that then? Because I've heard you say, I've heard you say only tonight, diabolic politics.
Yes.
You've also talked about the criminalization of politics.
That's part of the diabolic politics that we're talking about.
Fantastic. Break it down.
It's clear. Let me look. If you engage in hate speech, you engage in hate speech. In some countries, that is criminal activity. Right. In fact, in Kenya, they criminalize hate speech.
So is the problem that it is not being seen as a crime in this part of the world? Is that what it is? Is that why it continues?
It is not only being seen, but it's also being encouraged by political actors. Being encouraged in the sense that they do not come out and condemn it.
Right.
They do it through proxies. And the proxies are thugs, touts, multi-part touts. They are the ones who are involved in this.
So how do we check this? How do we put an end to it?
While we do it, then we hold those doing it, we call them, you cannot, I've looked at the elections, the process, the amount of airspace given to those, not even in the social media, but even on the mainstream television, platform given to people to spread hate in the country because of elections.
And that is why INEC needs to come clean on this, because I still cannot fathom how someone wakes up and you say, heaven is unsafe and hell is best, because we all know the security in VGC.
It is simply advising people to take care.
We're not done, so we'll come back to you, Prof. Thank you.
Absolutely, Professor Adeliji Nodu is still very much with us. You're watching a special coverage of Nigeria's state governorship and houses of assembly elections. There's more when we return. Stay with us.
You're welcome back. Still watching special coverage of Nigeria's governorship and state houses of assembly elections here on Arise News. I'm Sulaiman Alede.
And I am Ngozi Alebu. Well, perhaps a common thread in the elections across several states was that voter turnout was low. Now let's go to Rivers State now, where there was voter apathy in the capital, Port Harcourt. Some voters attributed the low turnout to a lack of confidence in the electoral body INEC. Arise correspondent of Eteme George has more.
Ad hoc staff of the INEC waited for voters in some polling units at the Ajip area of Port Harcourt, the Rivers State capital. In another polling unit, other ad hoc staff of the INEC were busy attending to voters who had come to perform their civic duties. The turnout seems far short of the mark in comparison with the presidential and National Assembly elections.
25th of February, we had a good turnout and people were ready to vote. But what I feel today is a lot of persons are heartbroken because the outcome of what they had on the 25th was not actually reflected. But I just had to come because I had to exercise my own franchise.
The last election we had over 500 persons, and today you can see the crowd, we are less than 200. People are really not happy about what happened the last time, so the turnout is what you can see behind me. But we are really not happy. We hope that INEC will do what they promised. We hope that our votes will count. We hope that the results will be uploaded real time.
No matter what happened, we still have this confidence that the right thing will be done. Even the 25th February, we still have the confidence that the right thing will be done. We still have the confidence. That's why I'm coming here today to vote.
A third polling unit in the Ajip area has more persons quite enthusiastic to exercise their franchise in an orderly manner. Just few kilometers away, some youth had taken up the space to play football on election day.
5th of February, we cast our votes normal, and there was a lot of turnout. I was even number 202 thereabout, queuing in line. We don't even have time for this football. But today the difference is very, very clear. There was nobody there. Nobody. Everybody felt that for the fact that the first one did not count, then why then do we come and waste our time? So let's but normally I've gone and done my own duty.
The last one we voted the party we voted for. We were supposed to, as we were expecting the winner, but what we were expecting was not what we had. We had another different result. So there's no need of voting.
That's the reason you're playing football on election day?
Yes.
Number 50, Godwin Emefiele.
Ovieteme George, Arise News.
Whether you like it or not, there must be some bit of comic on D-Day. Well, earlier, voters in Ward 11 Obwama in Degema local government area of Rivers State say sensitive materials are yet to arrive, despite the presence of INEC ad hoc. One of the voters yet to perform his civic duty at the governorship and House of Assembly elections in Rivers State is the Niger Delta People's Volunteer Force leader, Mujahid Dokubo Asari.
Up to this moment, voting has not commenced. And that is what is going on in almost all the other wards. In this local government, Degema local government, Asato local government, and Akukuto local government. These three local governments are the three Calabar local government and stronghold of the main contender in this election, Toye Patrick Deleko. Materials, sensitive materials have not arrived. We cannot be manipulated in this election. We have made a resolve on where we are going and where we stand. We are very peaceful people. There has never been violence in any election in this town. They've been very peaceful, as you can see. Everybody is peaceful. These are some of the people that are gathered at this unit. In the other 20 units across the communities, you will still see this crowd. They are very enthusiastic and expectant. They want to exercise their franchise.
Sorry, Dokubo there. Well, joining us now to tell us his experience during the election is former Minister of Transport and former Governor of Rivers State, Rotimi Amechi. He joins us live from Rivers State. Thank you so much. It's good to have you on this special election coverage. First off, let's get your assessment of today's outing by INEC.
I can only account for the things I heard about and the things I saw in my community. In my community today, as usual, my community youth stood their ground that INEC cannot cut away the materials and run back and run away. So when they finished voting and INEC refused to upload, I had to save a situation that would have been extremely violent. The youths had taken over the football field where INEC was trying to upload because INEC had claimed that they couldn't upload from there because the uploading was not successful. They wanted to go to the council secretariat where PDP usually would rig the election aided by the police. So the youths in my village refused. I was getting a bit violent before I was called to the place. When I got to the place, I saw policemen, I saw NX staff, and I asked what were they doing here. They said they came to take away the ad hoc staff. And I said, well, you and I will be overpowered by this number of youths that are here. So the best thing you can do is to upload. And believe me, in less than 1 hour, they uploaded the more than 25 units, which means that INEC was actually lying that the upload was not successful. Because if the youth did not insist, they would probably have cutted away the results sheet and everything and gone to the local government headquarters to write the result to favor PDP as usual. Don't forget that the allegation in Rivers State is that INEC staff are paid extra salaries by the Rivers State government. So they are literally working for Rivers State government. Now, for this election, as usual again, this election, like the presidential election, the policemen were compromised and the police was working with INEC. So you have a situation in Rivers State in which both the police and INEC are partisan. I had said earlier that APC was running an election not against PDP, but against police. As I'm talking to you now, they've arrested the APC coalition agent in Obiabo. He's in police detention. They arrested the House of Assembly candidate in Eche, Charles Anyanwu, on the day of the election. They arrested the Maker Ede, a House of Assembly candidate in Port Harcourt, on the day of the election. The governor declared 27 persons wanted. He has no power. I was once a governor. He has no power, whether constitutional or legal, to declare anybody wanted. He's not the IG. He's not the commissioner of police. He cannot declare anybody wanted. And police goes about implementing, searching, and looking for these people just to distract us from our election. So I wonder what you think that election will be. It's a failure, a complete failure of the system. And nobody's speaking. Nobody's asking the governor, where does he get this power from? Where? Just let the madman loose on the poor people. That caused apathy. And the apathy wasn't only in Port Harcourt and Obiabo, it was everywhere. everywhere. In Port Harcourt constituency 2, they were flogging voters who voted against PDP. And then if at the close of voting, they opened the ballot boxes by themselves and they were tearing ballot papers of APC and other parties. Is that an election? Can Mahmoud tell the world that is how they organize? In fact, it was so scornful when he said, like every other election, this one is full of imperfection, like every other election. Okay, so it's like a child who tells his father, look, I failed because others have been failing. But what's important is that he acknowledges that he failed.
Let me comment here because, Mr. Michi, a good thing that you said no one is acting, but again, you're speaking, which is a good thing. But again, quite frankly, you know, these are weighty allegations, and these are known faces, known institutions like the police and INEC. And if you say they are complicit, do we have enough, or do you have enough evidence that will help the country in pursuing this so that this is arrested and justice is done?
You know, just because I addressed the press earlier, a lot of people have said, you know, you're a member of APC, you don't need to speak the way you just spoke and all that and all that. I'm trying not to say a lot of things. Don't forget I served in this government and I know quite a lot as somebody who has served in this government. And I'm trying hard not to let the world know everything that's been going on. But if you ask for evidence, I just mentioned names, a member of House of Reps running for a second term, a day to the election. They say others from Abuja. He was arrested, detained. Till today, we have not been able to get bail for him. A day to the election of the House of Reps. What other evidence are you looking for? On the day of election, 3 members of APC who are contesting were arrested. What other evidence are you looking for? No, just tell me what evidence you're looking for. He said there are weighty allegations. Okay, allegation number 1. Charles Anyanwu was arrested. True or false? He was arrested. Emeka Ede was arrested on the day of election today. True or false? They are candidates of APC for House of Assembly. The collation agent for the governorship candidate was arrested 1 hour ago at Obiakpo because that's where they rig election. We personally told him to go and stay there and ensure that only the results that were collated from the units are allowed to be tabulated. And he's been taken to the police station at Okoro Nodo police station. So Suleiman, can you tell me what you mean by weighty evidence?
With all of the allegations that you've made now, I mean, what steps are you going to take to ensure that the electoral process is cleaned up? And just like you've said, I mean, you've been part of this administration. You are still part of it. You're a chieftain of the APC. I mean, when you say the police is compromised, and everyone seems to be compromised. The police, for example, should we take the police out of the electoral process? Or what would be your recommendations to clean up the process?
Do I look like the president? There are limits. For Christ's sake, even if I was in the government, I was Minister for Transport. Assess me by what I did as Minister for Transport. I couldn't have been part of the process that would have appointed Mahmoud. I opposed that appointment because of capacity. We had written to INEC. This INEC staff in Rivers State are paid every month from resident electoral commissioner down salaries every month. And we wrote, and INEC did not deny that. So what else do you want me to do? The laws are there. Those to enforce the laws are the police. And if they are not enforcing the laws, what do you want me to do? Run to the front of the train and die? In fact, people are, and I'm wondering why I actually spoke. Because I've actually given up.
Sorry to butt in here.
Because I've given up.
Sorry to butt in here. Nigerians will want to know why you opposed. If you say you opposed the appointment of the INEC chair at that point in time, there must be a reason or reasons why you did that.
I said capacity. I've already answered the Suleiman. I said capacity. And I wasn't wrong. Suleiman, was election free and fair? I like to stop talking because I've been advised by some of my friends that I should continue to keep the dignified silence after I'm a member of APC.
A dignified silence for a statesman like yourself, I mean, you have earned that. You know, for Nigeria, how would it, pay Nigeria if people like you, decide to keep silent when you have from a vantage point to see the wrongs in the system, and you have the opportunity to help fix those challenges? Why are you shying away from that?
Because you and I have had this conversation before. You and I have had this conversation in private, and you try to persuade me not to keep silence. And my lawyer continues to say I should keep silence, and I've been keeping silence. The reason is simple. Even the Nigerians you want to speak on their behalf, do they care? Do the society care about the fact that these are the things you're saying, that things are wrong? When I was a governor, I spoke at the Freedom Park in Lagos, and I said, the reason why all of us, I included myself, the reason why the elite steal in Nigeria is because the public, the poor man has refused to stone them, or stone us. I said that at the Freedom Park, right? So what do you want me to say? What's new? Do you want me to say that I've not said before? I asked you this question when we had this conversation privately. I just came out. I didn't want to speak. My position was, go back to school, continue to face your academics and all that. I'm in law school, continue to focus on that and ignore what's going on. But I came out because how can you stay in Port Harcourt and one young man will just sit down, write names of people to be arrested, and the police goes to arrest, no crime. There has to be a crime for you to arrest somebody. The only person who has a power to arrest
is it not because impunity has been allowed to have a free reign since 1999 when this the democratic process started, and now things seem to be getting to a head? I mean, you were a two-term campaign DG of President Muhammadu Buhari, or the APC, if you like.
I am not the president. I am not the president. Only the president can call the IG to question. Only the president can say, for Christ's sake, what's going on in Port Harcourt? What's going on all over the country? Why are the police compromised? Police is not hiding it.
Well, many also thought that what Ngozi is trying to say, you're very close to him, once a speaker, two-time governor, minister, and of course you also hold a title in his home state, and the title is a trustworthy one, is a weighty one, so people expect you to help the nation.
Be up front.
Suleiman, can we cut off this interview? I don't want to continue the interview. I just don't want to continue the interview because there's nothing new to say that I've not said before. Absolutely nothing.
All right.
I was chairman of Governors Forum. I said quite a lot.
Okay. One last question. What do you expect Nigerians to do at this point? In 30 seconds, if you can.
Nothing. Nothing. Nigerians have never done anything. The only thing they did was the majority of the number of persons who voted for a third party. That's something new. That's something the youths have shown that maybe, but nothing. That's not the first time. My life could be at risk. How many Nigerians will protect me?
Yeah.
You know how many times people try to assassinate me and I refuse to talk to the public?
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Rotimi Amechi, former Minister of Transportation, Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining us on this special coverage of the governorship elections. All right, and this is where we'll have to leave it. I am Ngozi Alebu.
I'm Sulaiman. I'd also like to thank Professor Jinadu for his time, for being with us all through the night.
Thank you so much. Christian and Amaka will take it over from here.